I just watched the film that Gay Talese made called Voyeur from 2017 about the Voyeur's Motel story that became the book and that had the collision between Talese and the Washington Post that was so 20th century in its aspect. I read that article when it came out, remember it, and was like, wait, the guy killed somebody and this person saw it, and that's either accessory or maybe at worst or whatever, but I don't know what else you could say there. And I didn't know this movie had come out in 2017, 2 years ago now. I highly recommend it. But I thought I'd fire up the live stream because this is April 11, 2016 is when the article came out. And all of my New Yorkers are right here from the last couple of years. So I think I might have the magazine that has the Talese story in it. And I'm going to try to find that right now while hanging out with you all, which is really no one, as we know, to the tunes of music, tracks of the day. This is the day that I came up with, there's a nice way to do this, by the way, so there's new stuff all the time. This is Chipple, which is pretty cool. And then I'll do a shuffle, so it'll just be everything that happens after that. On the list, as it were. I'm going to try to find the... Sorry, I keep forgetting where the camera is when I'm doing it quickly. The Gay Talese article in the New Yorker from April 11th of 2016. I'm going to be here, under the plant. Now, a lot of this material I use for collage. Here we go, there's some 2016s. Time travel. So simple. I don't know how you folks think you're not able to do it yet. It's just that you can't do it with anybody else. And it's not often possible to explain the experience to anyone else. But bam, time travel. Looking for April 11th, 2016. Boy, there's some sweet covers in here. I should just exclude you from that. That makes no sense, right? What we do is we forward. So in this case, we're looking for April 17th. Oh, I loved it, this one. This one's great. I really think this one's great. Juste Van Noir. Juste Soir. I loved this one. It had such a liberating feeling when I saw it. It's a good one. That, for example, I like to pull out April, but wrong year. attempt to find the April 11th, 2016 issue, which has the Gay Talese piece. December that year. August. And if we do have it, we're going to pull it out. And I think we might read it. The thing that started it all. And the movie exposes the dude so badly and forces the reporter to do what he had to do in that instance. And not only that, the guy was just ridiculous. We're not understanding exactly how journalism works. Maybe that's the modern era. Maybe that's the times that we live in. That's why I believe this movie, Voyeur, if you get a chance. It was from this year, 2017. See, look how easy time travel is. Indeed. That's pretty nice. Brunetti. Looking for. Oh, here we go. Getting close here. 2016, July, August, October, November. We may not have it. That's Noah Syndergaard cover. Yeah, the artists all live on Ulrichs in this case, but live in the outer boroughs, so they don't look nuts, stuff like that. Yeah, we're going all around it, but we're not finding it. Summer reading issue from last summer. Sorry to remember this. Oh, Ulrichsen again. Sorry, honey, that one's folded up there. April 24. It's the one right before this. I remember this cover. That's a great cover. Look at that. That's a beautiful. Canada? Let's see who this artist is. Canada Chapman. Canada Chapman is an illustrator. He has contributed work to MTK-on-the-mic. That's a nice one. Canada. Trying to narrow in on the issue with the Gay Talese piece, which I don't know if I have to, but if I do, after seeing the movie Voyeur, I want to try to find look. Let's go. Oh no, it's an advert. Oh, collagable material here, by the way. Jenny. They're all mixed up, is the problem. Because I use them for different things sometimes. So my swimmers might be here. No, I do that here. So that is the answer to the question. July 2016. It's in this. It's just a couple of issues before this. So it should be here. But it could be in the car, or it could be at the house, or I could have chucked it, or I could have made it. All those things are possible. I think to keep it. Now having seen that film, and the other cool thing is we got to do some time travel. Alright. There's a nice little moment of the time travel at the top. Lame but term. They call it. Especially when you don't have a set. Or the house. November 2016. Very lit. These are regular, I guess, so I don't put a description of the master for it, but that's a pretty sweet one. Okay, so that was fun. Enjoyed the gamesmanship of it all. However, it was a failure, total failure. And now you're just staring closely at my hand. It's moronic. That's right. There's a lot of moronicism. General moronicity. Yes. So, answer, no, we do not have the Talese. But that was fun to look. I want to put those up the plan agenda. We're in the middle of a massive move right now. What actually needs to happen is I've brought two major pieces to the studio. I opened the Discourse on the Polarizing Events. That's what all that is back there. And this is. And I have the stack over here. And the new content that's going to be pulled out for conversion. We're converting things now. And this is all the physical material that goes with that content. So, what needs to happen now is a studio shift. And I need to contemplate that. I need to really think about that, because I like, as you can tell from the previous couple of months watching here, I like fixating things, rocking it that way for as long as I can, and then making big adjustments, which are healthy for progress to me. So, what we're going to do, now that we've pulled the magazines out, actually, we can arrange them too. We're going to, oh man, these, The Middleman's Perch. You know why the Middleman's Perch is called the Middleman's Perch? Because it's a perch. You just have a limited amount of... You can't build on to it. And it's the middle of everything. You're not at the top, you're not at the bottom. You know what I'm saying? On the Middleman's Perch, you're not at the top. You're not at the bottom. You are discovering interesting, fascinating information chunks, I hope, such as this film, Voyeur, based on Gay Tillese's Voyeur's Motel. So what we could do is just read it now, which I think we ought to do. When I read it, it bothered me. When I read it, it bothered me. And then time passed. And I forgot about it, basically. Hey, what if it's the issue that Drucker was the cover? And that's December of 2015. This was a great Drucker from December of 2015. I had it on the wall for a while. There's an interview I did with Eric on the mall at Central Park that I'm kind of proud of. I always liked our conversation at that moment. The patter was good. I was able to play the role, and we were able to talk about some deep stuff. And he cracked a couple of good jokes for me in Central Park. And this to me makes Eric Drucker a friend. I think, I see him once a decade and a half. Anyway, that was December 2015 Drucker from the cover. If you want to hear that interview, it's on the archive site. If you go to radio, I think you can hear my interview with Drucker on the mall at Central Park. Check that stack. There are no other stacks, right? Of magazines? No, there aren't. Alright, so it's time to basically make this move happen. And here's what we want to do. We want to draw it out so we can make it happen in a good, smart way. That's what we were just about to do moments ago before we got freaked out by this piece by Gay Tillese. No, not by the piece, but by the... there's another one that I took the cover off of. Oh yeah, October 2017. Check this one out. This one's really nice. I don't have the... Kikuo. I like that one a lot. Kikuo. Look at that. That's just rad looking. There's our deep loop map mark. Our robot overlords. Pretty cool. This ep of the live stream is turning out to be about New Yorker covers by accident, which I like. I wasn't planning that at all. I was just looking for this piece. And trying to see if there are any other stacks here. There aren't. That's it. That's all the New Yorkers I have. There were a lot of 17, 18, 16. Yeah, that's basically 16, 17, and 18, where the 16s are pretty thin. So, that's good to know just for reference, because if we have another situation like that, we'll know whether those magazines are in-house or not. So this is what has to happen now. The studio has to be rearranged. Be rearranged so that this table moves down almost all the way to the end. Pulling this out, turning that table around So now it's one long table from that wall to that bookshelf, and the middle is wide open. We're gonna gut that corner. When we do that, because we have to pull all those bags out in order to put the metal case in and these two bags in. If these are sideways, there'll be room over there. I could move this over there. Light table can go over there. Yeah, I think we've got a plan here. Executing that next. This is going to end up being an episode about the Voyeur, a film about this article by Gay Talese, which ended up becoming a complete mess and revealing a man who it's just almost impossible to describe. But what was attractive to me is that when I was in New York, I used to work as a fact checker and as a, proofer, a copy editor and stuff like that. Content too. So I'm familiar with the industry, at least the way it was. And Talese is impeccable in that regard. So you have this, but he's also got that 90s TV thing, that star faculty era that I keep talking about in the academy, where the pundit culture that we have now was born. He wants to be seen, has to be seen as a reporter, and is attempting to report on things that are difficult to report upon. And this thing fell apart in his hands. And he had video documentation to be able to make a documentary, Voyeur. And the industry, the publishing industry, the elements of it are exposed so elegantly as a result. You have the subject, you have the journalist, you have the publisher, you have the attorneys for the publisher, you have the videography crew who are doing the documentary, you have the reporters' disdain for them, you have the subject's disdain for the author, you have the editors and publishers of the separate entity, which is the New Yorker magazine in this instance. And the writer throughout, it's just so great in the doc if you notice, because it happens so, he's talking fast, he's talking to the guy, and he's like, well, it's because of the New Yorker, the goddamn New Yorker. Every time, even when he's talking about how we're going to get so much exposure because we want to try to get this into the New Yorker, the goddamn New Yorker. And when that happens, it's going to be like, he says it as a rush almost. Comma, the goddamn New Yorker is attached to every time he says New Yorker. And there's so much in that's 20th century and kind of reminiscent of that relationship between the writer and the magazine that many of us cherished when we read about writers all through the 20th century and in the magazine. And I remember, and I've also gone through this change of all of the editors. Okay, this is a great opportunity for me to be very frank about my opinions about the New Yorker. There are some that are very critical that I'm angry still about. The October issue should have had that piece where Lehman got to go to the White House and talk to George Bush should have been in the black issue, and it wasn't. It had to come out till October 1st, where he had first time he had access to the president. It was certainly back in time, and that doesn't happen until the 1st. We can talk about that another time when we're talking about the 9/11 events, but that one was upsetting. there was no internet then, so it wasn't like they could just put it up on the NewYorker.com. They were doing original work at that moment, critical original work at that moment. And that's when they became, it was clear they were the fashion-y side of the intellectual class was running strong to me then. So I have a lot of problems with the magazines. A lot of it's fashion-y. And I'm not into fashion. I am into art, literature, culture. Uh, I love the far-flung journalists. Those are the reporters at large. The intellectuals that you get in the New Yorker are fantastic. This situation, I did not have respect for Gay Talese the way, say, my dad's generation respected him. You know what I mean? But I was aware of him, and I'd read all the stuff that came out in the magazine, frankly, or I may have read a book. I mean, the book that I don't want to talk about the titles of his books right now. That's not sensible. But the film, Voyeur, from 2017, about Gay Talese's battle with the man who for 25 years he exchanged a dialogue with the intention of saying, well, one day when you feel like you want to make this a public thing, I'm willing to do that with you as a journalist, as the only journalist you brought this to, and then was subterfuged by the subjects. I don't know what you want to say. Psychosis? Egotism? Delusion? That was so hyper-focused in this act of voyeurism. Is revelatory from a journalistic standpoint. And he describes how the Washington Post calls him to ask the questions, and he reacted the way he would have in the past. In the modern era, he didn't want to even deal with it. He knew he couldn't defend it. If the fact checkers at the New Yorker couldn't defend it, well, then the publisher should have had a fact checker. Now, this is a thing that was beginning even when I was working in the industry at the turn of the millennium. We would complain, these magazines, we were all being pretty strict and tight. Not pretty strict, extremely strict and tight, to the point where I would have the folder of all the notes from the writer, and the writer and I, and someone from the staff, usually an editor, would go upstairs or downstairs, I forget which direction, to the lawyer's office, and we'd all sit in chairs, and we'd go over the thing, and the lawyer would say, you can't say this, and the writer, if he was smart, would be like, I can, turn to me, and I'd go, da-da-da, yes, I can confirm that those statements, blah, 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 blah. If he was trying to get paid in a fashionista, which was just as much as a thing as the time, it was, sure, kill it, and lawyers were editing pieces left and right. Because it was a sexy time, the millennium, and nobody was really, it was before 9/11. And all that was on. I observed it from within, like a mole in the industry, the publishing industry. Learned all about magazine publishing. And then the industry went away. But this is fascinating. Check out that documentary. I think you'll enjoy it. I don't like Talese any more than I did in the past, nor feel like I really connect with him anymore with his interests. But I respect his approach to the discipline of journalism, which is just going out the toilet. I mean, as he says, down the toilet is where it's gone. He said his situation in that was to be. I can't even imagine. Of course. But yeah, it's failing fabulously is what it is. Some people can be at that stage in life and that level of recognition. The goddamn New Yorker. Gerald Foos and the Gay Talese. Voyeur from 2017 about the April 11, 2016 article in the New Yorker called The Voyeur's Motel.